This is episode 143 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, and in this episode, we're going to discuss ketosis. On our last episode, we met Susan, a client of mine. Because she was interested in ketosis, I asked her to come onto this show. You'll find the show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/143. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Thank you for being here. The 30-day Sugar Detox Challenge starts September 1st. I want you to join us for this first challenge by going to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/challenge. This is going to be awesome, and I don't want you to miss it. All right, so today we're going to get into ketosis, and I'm happy to have Susan sticking around. When we interviewed her on the last episode, she had a question about ketosis when I announced to the Forever Fitness training group that I was going to go into ketosis as a way of dropping a little bit of body fat. I was not happy from the last eating experiment that I did with the pescatarian diet. I had actually gained some weight towards the end of that practice. The doctor was happy with a lot of my lab numbers, but I wasn't happy with my body fat at that point. So that said, I decided I would go back into ketosis, which was part of what really worked for me when I was going through some of my major weight loss. Towards the end of it, as I started to plateau, I did experiment with ketosis and found it quite effective at helping me drop body fat relatively quickly and safely. So she asked, and so Susan, welcome.
Nice to be here.
Okay. So anyway, I want to go into ketosis a little bit deeper than we did on the other episode. And if you'll go back to episode 23 with Jimmy Moore, we did talk about ketosis. But if you recall back then, I kept those episodes relatively short. So we really only touched the surface. And then again, in episode 77, I talked to Dr. Jason Fung about his book, The Obesity Code, or The Obesity Code. In The Obesity Code, if you listen to the language of what's in there and what we talked about with regards to insulin, that is sort of the key, the driver of why ketosis works the way it works. And so that's what I really want to kind of get into. But if you want more information, I'd encourage you to go into those. And again, The Obesity Code is a great book, as is Jimmy Moore's book, The Keto Clarity. Those are two resources that I've had to kind of guide me along, and two books that I would encourage you to purchase if you decide you want to do something like this. But let's get into the theory a little bit. So basically, the body has two mechanisms for creating energy. The first is to basically burn glucose. So glucose is a molecule that comes from sugar. It's basically sugar in a simple form. And it circulates, it stores in our liver, it stores in our muscles, and it circulates through our bloodstream. And insulin is the tool that our body uses to make sure that we have just enough blood sugar to operate the way we need to. So if you're a sugar burner, then you're basically relying on insulin to kind of be the brakes and then to let off the brakes. So it's not so much the pushing the gas. Your mouth is the gas. The amount of sugar you eat is the gas. The mouth, the insulin is basically the brakes. Okay? So when you hear someone is metabolically challenged, what you have is someone who's taking in more sugar, basically pressing the gas at the same time they're pushing the brake. And you would never do that with your car, but unfortunately that's what we do with our bodies. Okay? A fat burner, which is the other way, is basically your body burning fat. And so when you're burning fat, what happens is your body can use the fat for energy, and then it will produce these things called ketones. And these ketone bodies can actually go into your brain and actually fuel your brain. In fact, there's a lot of science that says that ketones are a better fuel for the brain. And that's why ketosis is actually a pretty effective cure for epilepsy and other illnesses that are brain related, because the ketones don't cause the oxidative damage that sugar does. So a lot of people who get into epileptic fits all the time, they will go into a ketotic diet and actually they'll have fewer seizures. So those are the two mechanisms to fuel your body. Now, we've lived most of our lives in our current era eating sugar, eating carbs, and in some cases overeating protein, which if you eat more protein than you need, the metaphor I like to use is, let's say you're a bricklayer and you can only lay 10 bricks a day, but you bring 20 bricks. Now you've got to set those other 10 bricks aside. Well, where are those going to get set aside? Well, the protein, the only way it can be set aside is to be turned to sugar. And then basically, if there's too much sugar already there, it just like that, the insulin will then store it away as fat. So you don't want too much protein and you don't want too much sugar. As a sugar burner, if you're eating just the right amount of sugar, you're not going to generally have weight gain. And if you're eating regularly, you're not going to have the insulin surges and the sugar spikes and all the things that are related with that. Unfortunately, with more and more processed foods available to us and us eating more and more of them, just by the nature of availability and the taste and everything else, we've now become major sugar burners that makes it very, very hard for us to maintain level blood sugar. That's why a lot of people will have the diets eat 5 small or 6 small meals a day. Just again, their whole point is to stabilize your blood sugar so you don't have those spikes. So you're not storing a lot of fat away with those excesses. So those are the kind of the two theories. When you get your body into a fat burning mode, something interesting happens. We're walking around with a large storage of fat on our body. And when we get our body really, really comfortable using fat as a fuel source, it will start burning our own fat when there's not enough food available. And sometimes even it's not even about there being food available. A lot of people get into deep ketosis and they're not even hungry and they can go days without eating. I'm not a big proponent of long-term fasts yet. Dr. Fung is. He uses that with his patients. Jimmy Moore is. He's doing that himself and experimenting with them, and he's going to come out with a book on fasting. I did an episode on fasting with Jimmy Moore. I believe that was episode number 28. And again, Dr. Fung, working with his clients, is very big into fasting. But fasting and intermittent fasting particularly are almost like a byproduct of getting yourself into ketosis because you just don't need as much food because your body's carrying the fat with it. So your body just starts burning its own body fat and you don't get those hunger situations. Plus, when you're eating fat, fat's a lot more satiating than simple carbs. Simple carbs get burned up really, really quickly, get into the blood, and then get shuttled away if they're not needed. Whereas fat is something that's going to burn slow and something that your body's going to use for long-term energy. That's why fat has almost over twice as many calories as the simple carbs. It's just something that's going to burn a lot slower and burn longer and not brighter.
So if you're primarily a sugar burner and you try to fast, that's where you get like the hypoglycemia and you get the shakes. And
yeah, because what happens is I've got insulin in my system that's looking for a certain blood sugar. It works me to a certain level. Now I'm not eating. And so my blood sugar is going to start to drop. The insulin will turn off, but again, it's just a brake pedal. So it doesn't have any way to really get more sugar out there. Now, your muscles will break down. Your liver will break down because they have stored glycogen. So they can give up. If the brain's going to die, that's where it's going to go. It's going to say, okay, muscles, we don't need you. Liver, we don't need you. It's all for me. And they'll break down to provide the glycogen that you need to survive, because your body will do that. And that's when you hear, about metabolic breakdown and people saying, okay, well, my metabolism got killed. It's really just that they screwed up their insulin and it screwed up, basically now dropping muscle rather than fat. So there probably is, and I'm just saying this in my theory, there probably is some happy medium where you can be very, very efficient at burning fat and burning sugar. The problem is that most people can't get there. They can't figure out what that level is. It's almost too hard. And a lot of us are either on or off. So it's a lot of times just easier to say, I'm going to go on something. And you mentioned something in the last podcast that you would go on the Atkins diet. Well, people compare keto to the Atkins diet because they do very similar things. They drop your carbohydrates really, really low. The difference with most people that go on keto is they kind of look at it as a lifestyle, not a diet. So when you talk to people that are into ketosis and into keto, will be a keto diet, they don't look at it as a diet. They just look at it as, okay, I'm just not going to eat those sugary things. I'm going to eat more fats and I'm going to eat moderate protein and low carbs. And we'll get into that in a minute, what that actually means.
But it's the whole, this is a journey, not a destination type of thinking.
And exactly. And what's going to happen, one of the cool things that happens, you'll lose your body fat to a point, and then you'll kind of hit this plateau. We all hit plateaus. I've said it many, many times. It's the only absolute in weight loss. You will hit a plateau. It's a given. Okay, so ketosis can be a great way to break through that plateau. But even then, you're likely to hit another plateau because your body will naturally kick up and say, okay, you've gone from, let's say, like me, I went from a weight of, say, 215 down to a weight of 205. And my body naturally said, no, we want to be closer to 212. That's our natural body weight right now. So it made me a little hungrier. Ghrelin kicked in, which is the hunger thing. Like I said, it's the gas pedal. My mouth started eating more food. And more food, even when it's just fat, is still more food. So when I started eating more fat, even while I was in ketosis, my body would make me eat more. And so I would eat more. Now, the cool thing about that was, okay, I got back to that set weight of 212, but then my body, the ghrelin kicked off. I said, okay, you're where you're supposed to be. So I run that plateau for a period of time. And then that's where people will sit there and do fasting and other things to try to break that plateau and get down below it. And they're using a little bit of willpower to try to push past that ghrelin impact. And they get there. So it is a lifestyle. It's a way of managing your health. And more and more studies are coming out to say that ketosis is actually a healthy state to be in. And a lot of people who are into ancestral health will say, we didn't always have a Walmart and a Save One and a Safeway and a Kroger around the corner. And I don't know what the shopping centers are around your area, but we didn't always have the availability of the food. I walk down a cereal aisle now and I'm like, there's enough food here to feed 100 people for a year sitting on the cereal aisle in my in the shopping, right now. It's just sitting there. But we didn't always have that. Many times, my ancestors are all from the Northern Europe. So you can imagine the winters there, they didn't have vegetables. They didn't have fruits. I mean, they may have learned to put some things away, but they didn't have a broad availability of that. So I'm pretty sure my ancestors did not eat a lot of carbs during the winter. They probably ate a lot of fatty meat, fish, and then nuts and stuff like that they could still carry with them for a few months. And then when it got into the spring, there probably were some fruits and things that became available, but not the tropical fruits. So there were no pineapples in Northern Europe. There were no papayas. So I have to believe my ancestors, all the way back as far as they could go genetically, were not heavy sugar eaters. And in fact, our consumption of sugar of over 150 pounds per person per year in the United States is 75 times what it was in the early 1900s. So, we're looking at these crazy amounts of sugar that we eat now and simple carbs and sugars. And so that's really the problem. That's why we're fat. So that's the core reason right there. So there are some people that are concerned about it. Like I said, I'm doing it, so I'm probably going to seem a little bit more pro to it than a lot of people might think. But there are some concerns, and I do want to cover off on those because I don't think it's trivial for people to be concerned about it. And family members will be upset when you're doing this and say, well, you can't live that way and da-da-da-da. You're killing yourself. You're going to kill your metabolism. You're going to hear all those things, okay? The first one I want to talk about is a similar word. It's called ketoacidosis. And what that is a very dangerous condition. And it does involve having high ketones. But we're not talking kind of ketones that you would have in ketosis. Normal ketosis happens when you hit a blood level of ketones of 0.5 to anywhere up to about 6. I measured mine this morning. I was at 3.6. But the other thing that happens during that period of time when you get into ketoacidosis is you also have high blood sugar. So that's a very, very unusual situation for you to have high blood sugar and high ketones. My blood sugar this morning was 80. My fasting blood sugar was 80. My ketone levels were 3.6. So I'm completely in the safe zone. I'm not anywhere close to having it near 15 to 20, in ketones for ketoacidosis, and my blood sugar was not alarmingly high. It was actually normal. Most people that suffer from ketoacidosis are type 1 diabetics. But here's the funny thing. Ketosis is a great treatment for diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. So it's kind of an oxymoron that it's dangerous. It's dangerous to a very small subset, but it's also very beneficial to just about everybody.
How do you test it yourself?
Okay, I'll get into that. I'm going to talk about tools a little bit later, but let me continue on the concerns, okay? Another concern is compliance, okay? People around you are probably not going to eat the way you do. I know my wife doesn't yet. She told me when I first started talking about getting into this, she's like, I think I'll do it too. And I says, well, okay, you can't do this, and you can't mix that into your drinks, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. She's like, I can't do ketosis. And so compliance is a challenge. You really kind of have to commit yourself to say, okay, I'm going to keep my carbs really, really low. And when I'm talking really, really low, I have to keep my carbs below 30 to stay in ketosis. Okay, 30 grams total, not net, total. So that means I can have some green leafy vegetables. I can have some squash, some zucchini, but I cannot have potatoes, not even sweet potatoes. I cannot have carrots. I cannot have barbecue sauce. I cannot have. My wife bought me these quinoa chips. She says, these look really healthy. I thought you'd like them. And I look at the package and it's like, well, it sounds great. Quinoa's got high protein. Maybe these are okay. Moderate protein. I said, maybe these will be pretty good. No, one serving of those quinoa chips had 19 grams of carbohydrates. It was only 1 gram of sugar, but it was 19 grams of carbohydrates, which meant that I could only have one serving, and that would probably be it. I mean, even the kombucha I drink has 13 grams of carbs, so I don't even drink kombucha every day now because I have to try to keep my total carbs down.
That's low.
So compliance is hard. Now, you can tweak it after you get into it. Initially, people try to target 20 to get into ketosis, and then after that, you can kind of ratchet it up a little bit and see how you come and how it's working for you. People have different tolerances, and if you're running and doing other physical things, you may be able to get away with as much as close to 100. But it's really going to be individualized. But to truly kind of get yourself into ketosis and just get it over with, because we'll talk about the next thing. But to get into it, you really want to kind of hit it hard and get it done. The reason I say hit it hard and get it done is a lot of people will go through a carb withdrawal. And again, remember we were talking about being a sugar burner and trying to go to a fat burner. Well, that's like putting diesel in your car. It's not going to run very well. But if you had an engine that was built to be able to take the fuels, you know that there would be a period of time when it would sputter. I used to have an old truck, and that truck that I got from my father, it had 2 gas tanks. And the funny thing was, if I was driving down the road and realized that one of the tanks was running low, I could switch it to the other tank, and the truck would sputter a little bit for, a little while, maybe a minute, and then it'd pick back up. Okay. If I had run out of gas, I had to actually pour some fuel into the carburetor to actually get it to start again because it couldn't read that other gas tank efficiently. And our bodies are similar. So there's going to be a period of a few days after you start this that you're going to feel like hell. Okay. And when I did it, what happened was for two or 3 days, I didn't feel too bad. I was a little fatigued and really didn't have a lot of energy. And then the 4th day, my blood sugar plummeted. I say plummeted. I mean, it was still kind of normal. It was 56, which was relatively low, but I felt like crap. I called in sick. I was like, I'm out. Okay. It's not there,
Now, is it like almost flu-like? Where you
Yeah. It's actually the term that other people will use called keto flu. So a lot of folks in the keto community are like, let's not call it flu because it makes it sound like keto is a bad thing. Let's call it carb withdrawals, because we're getting off of a drug.
But you feel the same.
Yeah, it's a withdrawal. It literally, it's a withdrawal feeling. It's a fluish feeling. You feel blah. You're low fatigue. You got fatigue. You don't feel good. And it's that point, like I said, it makes compliance hard because that's the point we sit there and say, my blood sugar was 56. What would I normally do with blood sugar of 56? Well, I'd eat something sweet to get my blood sugar back up. But that was the exact opposite of what I needed to do to get over that hump, to get into ketosis. Okay. And then I think one of the other concerns I want to talk about is overall medications. Is if you're diabetic or you're using any kind of medication to keep your your blood sugar low? Because a lot of doctors have just made this decision. We can't control what we put in our mouths. They can tell us not to eat those things, but we're going to eat those. So the doctor says don't eat the donut, we're going to eat the donut. So since the doctor has no confidence in us whatsoever, they'll put us on a medication. And they'll just keep doubling down on that medication as long as they have to make it work. So if you're on medications and you decide you want to do this, you need to talk to your doctor first to say, hey, if I start cutting my sugar way back, if I start cutting my carbs way back and only eating vegetables and things like that, that's going to affect my need for insulin. That's going to affect my need for these other blood sugar medicines, right? And the doctor will say, yeah. Say, so what's your advice as I start going into this eating less crap and eating more decent food? Should I start tapering down, and how would you recommend that I taper down on these things? Now, for a lot of people that are on insulin, they probably already manage their insulin based on need, but a lot of times with the blood sugar medicines, they might not. So just talk to your doctor and make sure if you are on medication, that if you're going to do something like this, if you tell him you're going to try a ketosis diet, he's going to say no, because his medical training is going to say that's going to give you ketoacidosis, because the words are so similar. He's just going to think you're doing something wrong. So you can tell him it's a low-carb diet. You can tell him that, basically you're going to go a whole food diet. Tell him it's a version of paleo without as much protein, whatever. But just tell him that you know that your sugars are going to go down. And if you're on any medication to control that, then that's something we want to manage. Now, another question you had related to hypothyroidism.
Exactly. Yep.
So I did a little bit of research on that because I couldn't come up with a logical reason why it would matter. But again, anytime you change what you eat, anytime you change what you do, it will have an impact on your hormone profiles. And so the only thing I could really find in there about that was that you may notice if you're having your T3 measured, typically if you have thyroid issues, they measure all of them, T3, T4, and the whole panel. Your T3 might go down. But T3, as I understand it, is not the important one. The T4 is. You'll know more about that than I will.
Right, and the TSH.
To my knowledge, and all the research I did, there's no science to prove that there's any harm. But if you're having yourself checked regularly, you're taking your medication, I don't see any reason why it would affect you. So you may want to do some of your own research and, again, talk to your doctor and say, if I change my food, what's the plan for me to manage my thyroid? And, if you're not in bad shape with it, they may say it's not a problem. Otherwise, you may want to get your thyroid checked a little bit more often just to see how it's affecting your numbers.
And I would think it would depend somewhat on how you're eating before you make that change and after. Like if I do more whole foods, it might not be such a huge...
It's not going to be that drastic. And the reality is all you're really going to do is from your current whole food diet is probably taper down a little bit on your protein. You're going to probably taper down a little bit on some of the more sweet, sugary vegetables and fruits. I mean, I can't eat fruit at all now to keep my carbs down, but sorry, it's
no, summer peaches. That's all I'm thinking about. Okay,
well, then you might want to wait till after the summer peach, at least have one or two, and then say, okay, I'm off. But or go ahead and can some. So when you're reach a weight, and then you say, okay, I'm going to go and cheat a day, and then I'll try to get back in because I know I'm fully adapted. Then we're there. Okay, so you talked about how to know and how to measure. When we talk about ketones in the body end up at different points in time taking on three different forms. There's a blood ketone, which is the one I pay the most attention to. There's a urine one, and there's a breath one. And so you can buy tools that will measure all three of those. And so I'm going to start with the least expensive. Well, it's probably maybe not the least expensive, but it's the one most people get because you can actually buy it at the grocery store pretty easily. And it's called Keto Sticks. And I'll have a link in the show notes for this episode that you guys can look into. But what you basically do is you dip this into your urine, and it will change to a darker color if you have the urine ketones. It's an acetone, basically. But if you have that in your urine, you can measure that. Now, that works very well at the beginning, because at the beginning, when you first start burning the fat that you're eating, your body's going to start creating the ketones, and that's where you're going to see it first. Okay? And then over time, it's going to start to build up in your blood. And so Precision Plus in the United States is the one that sells the blood monitor. And it works very, very similar to what you would do with to measure your blood sugar. In fact, it's the same actual machine. You just buy a different little stick for it. Anyway, with Precision Plus, you can measure your blood ketones. Now, the problem with this is these little sticks are very, very expensive because they're predominantly kept for people that are at risk of ketoacidosis. So they don't market them to the mass market. So the pricing on them is like, they think they have a very small market, but they just keep the price high. And that's why they have a small market. But I rely on that the most because to me, that's the most accurate. I know I know the ketone number in my blood. That has me feeling pretty good about where I am. And then the final one is basically it's called a Ketonics. And right now it's the only commercial version that's available that you can use your breath. The advantage of that is no pinpricks. It's accurate all the time. Because one of the problems with the urine ones is once you get keto adapted, once your body starts using those ketones, they're not going to show up in your urine anymore. So you might think that you've come out of ketosis because it's not showing up. So the accuracy of the urine one is very low. The accuracy of the one in the blood is very high. And the Ketonics, I'm not entirely certain. I haven't seen a lot of science. The guy who sells them says they're very accurate. He swears by them, but of course he sells them.
Of course he does, yeah.
At any rate, he manufactures them. But anyway, I will make sure for the show notes of this episode to have links to all of those. So it's going to be at older.fitness/143. And basically, there you can purchase any of these. Like I said, I use the urine ones and I also use the blood ones. But once you're in ketosis, the urine ones aren't really that valuable to you anymore. They're not really telling you how ketotic you are. Like I said, it starts at 0.5 and you want to be somewhere between 0.5 and 6, which is a pretty broad range. I was at 3.6 today, but I can be anywhere between 0.9 and that. 3.6 is right about the top that I've ever recorded. But again, I'm just now really, really getting deep into this.
I would think the urine ones wouldn't be as accurate after you're fully in it because your body's now using them versus excreting so many, right?
Yeah, they're going into your brain and they're being used for energy. Muscles can use them, organs use them, the heart uses them. So yeah, it's a pretty big thing. So yeah, they become less effective, but they're good at the beginning. So rather than pay $5 a stick every time you want to do it for the first 4 or 5 days, the urine sticks are a cost-effective way for you to see that you're getting toward and into ketosis. And then I switch over to the blood. So let's talk about a strategy for how we're going to do this, okay? What I would typically do is Jimmy Moore wrote the book, literally, called Keto Clarity. It's a very good book. I'll have a link in the show notes, again, episode 143, to that book. I did interview him in episode 23, so you can go listen to that and get a kind of, again, overview, but I think we're actually going a little deeper this time than he did. But he gives a lot more information about it in his book. So to start, you got to get your mindset and get committed, because this is a commitment. This is not something you just start and then stop and start and stop, because you don't want to go in and out, or you're going to just keep kind of cycling through that carb withdrawal and not really get what you want. And I think one of the worst things we could do, like you said, you get on a diet and you think it's a diet, and then you get off the diet and go back to eating the way you did, and you gain back the weight. And that's exactly what would happen here if you don't commit to doing this right. Okay, the next one is you're going to lower the carbs. Most people say target your total carbs at 20 grams. That's very hard, I'm going to admit. Even for me, it was very hard. And we're not talking net carbs, because a lot of people like to subtract out the fiber, but you don't. It's total carbs at the beginning. Now, you can start experimenting with things that have higher fiber and see what that does. And typically, a way I'll do that, rather than use a keto stick, I'll use the blood sugar sticks because they're cheaper after I've eaten a meal. So let's say someone told me they had problems with avocado, or they were concerned about avocado. Avocado is a very high-fat fruit, effectively. It is one of the fruits that you can eat. It's moderate carbs. And so some people may have a reaction to it, and they may go out of ketosis eating half an avocado. So what I encourage them to do is use the blood monitor before they ate the avocado to check their blood sugar, about a half an hour after they ate the avocado, and then maybe like an hour or 90 minutes after the avocado. If they don't see a spike in blood sugar, they're probably not pushing themselves out of ketosis. So that can be one way that you can test foods once you get there. You're going to do moderate protein. And what I typically recommend is 1 gram per kilogram of weight, or roughly a half a gram per pound. If you're lifting weights heavy like you are, then I would say you may want to step that up a little bit, but start on the low end and then see how you're recovering from your workouts, your strength, or anything. If you're noticing that, you're not recovering well, or you're not seeing, your strength's kind of diminished a little bit, you're not feeling it, just taper up the protein a little bit till you get to a point where you feel better.
Okay, that answers that question.
And if you're running a lot, putting on a lot of miles, you'll probably be able to get away with more carbs. So again, that's another thing where you may want to say, my carbs will probably be higher, but initially start at 20. So you're going to say 20 and then one half gram of protein per pound and start with that. Okay, and it's going to be high fat, and it's going to scare the crap out of people around you because they're going to think your heart's going to stop. And current science, new science is coming out, is basically saying that the whole fat cholesterol thing is just complete hogwash. It's actually the sugar that raises your bad cholesterol. And actually fat helps raise your good cholesterol. So you're going to eat plenty of fat. And what this means is, and it's all up to preference. I can tell you what I eat. I eat butter. I eat heavy cream, macadamia nuts, avocado, good olive oil, fatty cuts of grass-fed pastured meat, so pork and beef, fish, so that's what I'm eating. I'm eating those healthy fats, the fats that our ancestors ate, and out from healthy animals and from good plants and things like that. So again, I'm not just willy-nilly going to the grocery store and buying the fattest cut of meat. I'm making sure that it's a good quality meat. And yes, it's heavier in fat, but I enjoy it. Now, one of the beefs that the paleo Atkins and keto folks will get is, they're just bacon freaks, bacon. And they do. A lot of them do go the bacon route. I'm not. I'll eat some bacon, but I'm not a big fan of processed foods. So I limit my bacon intake. That's not where I'm getting most of my fat from. I will eat bacon, but typically I eat the uncured bacon from a pastured pig that is, raised probably about an hour from where I live. So I know where my meat's coming from, and I'm making sure that, again, I'm not eating a ton of processed stuff. It's stuff that was alive, and typically not long before I ate it.
So has it become expensive? Is it a big expense?
Here's the funny thing. I eat less. Total food quantity, I eat less. So let's say I went in and I bought a nice lean steak. Okay, one of the leanest cuts of steak I could buy. For 16 ounces, I'm getting 16 ounces of just pure meat, protein, okay? If I went and bought this pastured piece, I couldn't eat 16 ounces of meat. I used to walk into a steakhouse and eat a 24-ounce steak because it wasn't the best steak, or I was also a sugar eater, and that fat was just really going to be my energy, and all the sugar was going to end up being on my belly. So, I think the deal is you actually notice your appetite start to go down, and it shows on the scale. You'll see why, because I don't need all that energy because my body is giving me that energy naturally. And so the last couple things I'll say is make sure you're drinking plenty of water, because when you first go on this, carbohydrates have this capacity as you eat them to carry water, 4 times the amount of water that protein or fat will. So your foods that you're eating are not going to be as watery. So we get a lot of the water that we typically drink from the food. So when you eat an apple, there's a lot of juice. When you eat an orange or eat, peach that you were talking about, there's a lot of juice. There's a lot of moisture, a lot of water coming from that fruit. When you're not eating those things, you're not getting that moisture. So you're going to make sure you up your water intake. Also, pay attention to your electrolytes and things like that, like, your salt and potassium and things like that. Because if you move away from the processed foods, you're probably not getting as much of those. So you want to balance those out. I'm a big fan of bone broth. And a lot of people will use this cheat, and it's called medium chain triglycerides, MTC oil. And what this basically is it's a very simple oil that's typically extracted from coconut oil. And the body, when it encounters this oil, can only turn it into ketones. It really can't do much else with MTC oil. So it is something that will naturally boost your ketone levels. So a lot of people like to use it to get a higher ketone level, and it gives you some energy. It's kind of an energy boost. So I see MTC oil as a good way to potentially get through the flu if you're going to be someone who's going to cycle in and out of ketosis. To get through that withdrawal period, MTC oil might be a good tool to help that happen. And it might help with workouts too if you notice your energy levels a little low. That might be a good opportunity for you to consider using some MCT oil.
But that's different than coconut oil?
It is from coconut oil, but they've extracted it's like extracting the best parts of it. Problem with MCT oil is a lot of people have problems if they take too much of it at first, and it will cause diarrhea, like explosive diarrhea.
Oh, fine.
Yeah. So you don't want to just go say, okay, I the calories, I'm going to take 2 tablespoons of this so I can go feel better at my workout. You might feel much worse when you're running to the bathroom and don't make
might
it.
look worse too.
Yeah. So just realize that you have to find your tolerance for that. So if you're going to use MTC oil, start small and kind of ease into it till you figure out what your tolerance is. And your tolerance will increase and improve over time if you're using it. Occasionally, I will mix it and use it actually as a salad dressing instead of using olive oil. If I can't find a good olive oil, that's what I'll use. Okay, so let's talk about training because you are someone that enjoys training, and I want you to kind of understand this. You can exercise while you're going through this process, but I'm going to say during the withdrawal period, you probably won't want to. And I didn't. I made a conscious effort to avoid training during that period of time. And that was only because, again, I'd done it before. I knew kind of how my body was going to feel. And I knew, I was going to have some fluctuations there to get over the hump. So I didn't do a ton of training.
And you said it takes 4 or 5 days, right?
Yeah, it's about 4 or 5 days till you start. And a lot of people experience a kind of a euphoric feeling afterwards because now those ketones are in the brain and your brain actually enjoys them is the kind of the theory on that. So a lot of people feel a lot more energetic after they come out of it. But I'm not sure that that's not just a placebo effect of I felt like crap and now I feel wonderful because I'm still alive. But it's just kind of one of those things. I think, you go to your very, very low and then now you're up at somewhere moderate and it feels awesome. At any rate, people feel like they have a lot more energy. Now, I'm lifting after I've gotten into ketosis. A few weeks, I'm able to lift, I'm able to walk, I'm able to run, I'm able to do everything I was doing before while I was a sugar burner, and I'm not burning the sugar because I'm not eating the sugar. So it's not slowing me down at all. I can endurance train, I can lift heavy, and I'm not having any problems with that at all. And most people say they don't.
So are you seeing, other than how you feel though, are you seeing benefits, fat-wise, scale-wise?
And I will post a graph on the show notes episode. Again, it's older.fitness/143. In the month since I made the announcement I started this process, I've lost 15 pounds.
Wow. But as a postmenopausal woman, that wouldn't be typical.
But that's 2 inches off my stomach.
Oh my. Okay.
Okay.
That make after all the other stuff, I'm like, I don't know. And then I'm like, oh, okay, maybe.
Again, it's not for everybody, but it is a solution for a lot of people, and it is hard, but anything in life that's worth having typically is. I'm not going to counsel yay or nay. I'm going to say that it has its pros and it has its cons. If fat loss is something that's very, very important to you, particularly, in my case, losing fat off my belly, then this is a good methodology to do it. And one of the other key things that's pretty cool about this is there's limited muscle wasting when you're losing this weight. Because you're getting adequate protein. You make sure you just get adequate protein, just adequate. You find that point, and then the rest of what you need to eat, you make it up with fat. And there's lots of cookbooks. There's websites where you can look up keto recipes. A lot of them will call them fat bombs and stuff like that. But fat is delicious. I'm sorry, but it is.
It is. No, don't apologize.
It is a good way to eat. Yes, you have to give up some of the things that you enjoy. I've had to give up beer. You have to give up peaches. But it's not something that's forever. Again, people will cycle in and out. So you'll just have to learn how your body deals with ketosis. I know that when I cycle out, I'm out. I'm not a good cycle in, cycle out person. So I have to decide long term, that's, if I'm going to do this, if I go back to sugar, I'm going to have another episode of withdrawals to come back in. But that I know that myself. So, know yourself, just as we spoke in the last episode, and then the rest will take care of itself. So, well, we went a good long time. This is probably one of the longer episodes I've ever had, but I think it was really good content. Is there any other questions you had before we sign off?
I guess my only other question would be, obviously there's that male, female consideration. You've lost 15 pounds in a month. Is that, do you know how typical that is for?
Well, there's a curve, and you'll actually see it in the curve if you look at it. You're going to lose water weight initially. So the scale will go down quick for the first few days. Like I lost, after 2 days, I lost 5 pounds. Now, I know that's water. I know in my mind that's water. And then, there was a couple little plateau loopies during the month and then down. And so, I'm on a decline. Most people experience a similar thing, and it's a male or female doesn't so much matter. It's a compliance thing. If you're doing this now, again, a lot of people will try it and then they don't make it past the withdrawal period. Others, they just get into it. And there's been people that have lived in ketosis for years.
So eventually your body gets to that point where it feels comfortable, and then you will still be in ketosis, but you won't continue
because once your body gets down to what it considers a normal set weight, and then it's going to naturally start just making other adjustments. It's going to adjust your appetite. Like I said, ghrelin will step in if it needs to help you gain weight, and other leptin. I can't remember the other hormone that steps in and just says, okay, you don't need to eat anything. You're good. So you'll be satiated. You'll feel good when you don't need to eat. You'll eat. And a lot of people that are in ketosis just basically say they almost forget to eat. It's not like they're always thinking about food because they just, they're satiated. And then you'll hear all these other kind of tweaks and hacks where people will do this thing called bulletproof coffee, where they put a bunch of fat and butter in their coffee, and it's a meal. It's a fat meal. I don't know why they call it fasting. It's not fasting. So you're drinking your calories versus eating them. It's just a hack for someone to sit there and say, I want to get some fat in the morning. That's all I want is fat. I don't really want any protein or carbs. And I'm going to use that to satiate me until the afternoon when I'll go ahead and have a regular meal for me.
And that's where they put like the Kerrygold butter and the cream in their coffee.
Yeah, Kerrygold, and then they'll put oils like coconut oil or MCT oil in their coffees and use that just as a way to say, I'm not eating in the morning. I'm just taking this oil and fat in and using that for energy for the day. But if you look at the total calories in a bulletproof coffee, it's as many calories as you would eat for breakfast anyway. So I don't know why they say they're not eating it. It's just, kind of hogwash. It's calories, it's food. Your body's using it for energy. You can call it intermittent fasting with a bulletproof coffee in the morning, but I just call it breakfast.
Okay, sure. Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. Something to look into.
Okay. Well, if anybody has any questions, you can comment on older.fitness/143, and I'll be glad to have this conversation with you. Or you can go to the Facebook group. And again, hit me up there because, this is an interesting topic. More and more people are getting into it. So I hope you will look into it if it's something that you think will help you improve your life. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast. Don't forget to go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/challenge and sign up for the 30-day Sugar Detox Challenge. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet with Josh Middledorf and discuss his book, Cracking the Aging Code, The New Science of Growing Old, and what it means for staying young. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.